Hey guys. How are you? Hope you are doing great, and yeah, I have a great story for you guys today. We will see how a person got reincarnated in Attack on Titan world. With Chakra and Mangekyo Sharingan and Susanoo in his arsenal, how he will change the world of Attack on Titan. Chapter 1, The Beginning of Everything. Aiden, a boy who lived in misery with no apparent opportunity in the complicated life he had to live. However, one quiet day, Aiden's life took an unexpected turn. In just a few seconds his life changed for the better and he never felt depressed again, all in just a few seconds. Walking into a store, he bought a lottery ticket and after a while he was the #1 winner and won enough money to never work again in his entire life. Aiden was grateful to God, who promised to do anything to pay him back when the occasion arose. However, many say that after a moment of glory comes tragedy. Only a few months after winning the lottery, burglars broke into his home. To prevent a tragedy, Aiden pulled out his gun and began shooting at the burglars. He was able to take down 2 of the robbers, but just as he was about to check on his family he felt a large blow to the back of his head. One of the robbers had hit his head with a bat, causing him a great shock and losing consciousness on the spot. Some time later, he did not know what happened to him and the robbers, plunging into absolute darkness. Congratulations! Your life ended heroically and you managed to save your family from the robbers. You sacrificed your life for an honorable cause. Please hold on, calculating results. Calculating results. What the fuck is that supposed to be? Aiden couldn't understand the voices in his head clearly. He was supposed to be unconscious. What kind of variety was he going through right now? Tambra. Rewards calculated. You will be sent to a random world after listing your demands and debts. In the year 1995, Mr. Aiden wished with all his heart for a quiet and pleasant life for his family. As a debt, he will have to live in suffering according to the circumstances of his contract. Please spin the roulette wheel of the world. Am I spinning? Aiden mumbled, not knowing what was going on. Is he the only one lost up to this point? The roulette wheel is spinning. Are they playing a joke on me? Damn the hospitals, I'll have to file a lawsuit when I wake up. Aiden was losing his mind, afraid that he had gone crazy from his injuries in that incident. Congratulations! You were selected to survive in the world of Attack on Titans, an ideal world to begin with. Attack on the Titans, what memories! I still can't help but think that it was one of the best anime. Just when Aiden had lost orientation of what was going on, he hears another annoying ringing in his consciousness. Tambra. You are about to be sent to the Titan Attack world. To make your journey and destination a much safer start, you will be given the opportunity to obtain an ability, item, or superpower. If I go to the Titan world I would at least wish I had Superman's powers. Who the hell in their right mind wants to go to the world and attack the Titans? Aiden calmed down and took it all as if it was a joke from his addled brain. There are hundreds of options that you can get. I wish you the best of luck. When the voice stopped, Aiden could finally open his eyes. Looking at the place where he was standing, he could see a huge roulette wheel with different names and a drawing right next to it. Did I really go crazy? Aiden scoffed dryly. Please spin the roulette wheel. A bunny doll approached Aiden and immediately said, Me. Aiden smiled slightly, pointing at himself in confusion. Please spin the roulette wheel. The dummy had no intention of saying another different set of words. Come on, dude. I know this is my brain, I control my dreams. Aiden flashed a confident smile. Please spin the roulette wheel. This time, the rabbit pulled out a giant silver scissors. The tone of that doll's voice was more shrill, showing that he wasn't joking at all. Aiden recoiled slightly. Even if he was in his dreams somehow more aware than usual, he wouldn't want to be cut by a damn rabbit with a pair of scissors. All right, I'll do it now. Aiden held up his hands and walked over to the roulette wheel. Looking at the numerous names on the roulette wheel, Aiden struggled to smile and thought, what kind of garbage dream am I having? The boxes were varied: super strength, super soldier serum, nin manipulation, chi manipulation, Iron Man armor, absolutely ridiculous abilities and powers. Here we go. Under the terrified gaze of the rabbit with scissors, Aiden forcefully spun the roulette wheel and slowly backed away. His eyes widened as the speed of the roulette wheel slowed, the squares looked clearer and Eard could see that the tab that selects the prize was slowly ticking off unhelpful prizes. Come on Aiden, you're in a dream. Aiden touched his head and muttered, no, not that one. The roulette tab was stopping on a reward that was called, cute prisoner fighting style, Angel. Aiden didn't know it, for which he could only speculate that it was something very embarrassing. Aiden's eyes widened like saucers. The roulette tab once again moved to another square coming out of that weird fighting style. Yeah, my luck is unbelievable. Aiden shouted and almost hugged the rabbit with scissors due to excitement. Congratulations, Mangekyo Sharingan obtained. Secondary prize, ability to manipulate chakra in small proportions. Have a happy journey and remember, luck will never be on your side. Luck. I just won a pair of powerful eyes, my luck is very good. Aiden smiled and then sensed something wasn't right. Well, I'm finally waking up. Chapter 2, Takashi Ackerman. No, not again, you must wake up in the hospital. Takashi woke up again and for the second time in the same place. A hunter picked him up on a mountain and was sending him back after putting a bandage on his head. Takashi Ackerman, only 12 years old, was born on the 30th of December, 835 and it was in that year that fate put him in this world. Takashi, who woke up lying in the forest, vaguely remembered that he had plans to join the 104th Corps of soldiers that would be in the south recruiting new people. So he intended to join the army. If he didn't he would starve to death or he might be one more of those roaming the streets looking for food. Now Takashi had become a traveler from another world. He used to have another name, but now he had become completely Takashi. The real Takashi Ackerman had died just a few hours ago. He fell from a tree while hunting a bear. If it was a normal thing he should have died and become food for the bear's mouth. But just when he was on the verge of death, a powerful force suddenly emerged from Takashi Ackerman's body, increasing not only his strength but also his control over his body. And with that force did he kill the bear? Of course not, he is not Superman after all. A child even if he is an Ackerman is not an opponent of a bear at all. Besides, all his weapons including his bow accidentally fell to the ground earlier in your battle with the bear, so he could only run wildly, and only after desperately running for his life, he finally got rid of the bear in a somewhat miraculous way. But God did not favor this boy. Just before he could celebrate that he was able to avoid death, he fell backwards and his head hit a stone, dying on the spot. Then, the traveler formerly named Aiden opened his eyes and woke up in Takashi's body, wiping the blood from his face and discovering that a hunter was piggybacking him to a small village outside the forest. Takashi, are you awake? I heard that you would be joining the training corps too. Won't you have difficulties because of your injuries? Said the Lord who led Takashi to a small courtyard. No problem, Uncle Blouse, it was just a small wound on my head that will heal in a few days. I plan to leave soon after that. Takashi said in surprise. He never thought that the name of the gentleman who saved him would come naturally from his lips. Uncle Blouse, dressed in a hunter's outfit and a big hat, smiled. Takashi, you are a very strong boy, but this morning you recklessly went after a bear. This decision was very impulsive and did not conform to the precaution a hunter should take. I told you that if your father did not leave you enough money for you to have a quiet life, I could offer you whatever you needed. I don't know how you ended up killing that bear, but that doesn't take away from the fact that it was very dangerous. I'm aware that it's not easy for you to live alone, but I told you to count on my family for whatever you'll need. After all, I knew your father for more than 10 years. Now that he sadly passed away, I must also take care of you as part of my family. After hearing Mr. Blouse's words, Takashi smiled and said, "Thank you Uncle Blouse for your concern. Now that I am 12 years old, I can take care of myself. This time I will definitely become someone to look up to and protect everyone from those creepy titans so you can go back to hunting in the forest normally." Now, since he was another person from another world, he has some means. After all, even though he doesn't seem to have a system, he was granted a very impressive gift. He still remembers the roulette of that dream. With his great luck he obtained the Mangekyo Sharingan and the ability to use chakra. As his memories settled, he knew much more about his opportunities within this world. Just thinking about how powerful a Susanoo could be, there was no need to fear the titans. According to his own gifts, just the Susanoo alone is enough to live and survive in this world until the end, no matter if he can go blind due to the overuse of his eyes. It was then that the triumphant smile of his gifts suddenly hit him. It turns out that in order to use the Susanoo he has to give part of his lifespan in return to use the power of his eyes. No matter how you look at it, the stronger the Susanoo's form is, the more years of lifespan he will lose by using it without losing his eyesight as he normally would. Not only that, but also the chakra is too limited. He cannot create anything else besides using it only to increase physical strength and strengthen his body. Besides strengthening physical fitness several times, it can only be attached to the surface of fists, swords or arrows to increase attack power. And what are your opponents? A group of horrible titans that the most possible and common thing to happen when standing in front of one is to be paralyzed without knowing what to do. Knowing the history, Takashi Ackerman is talented. Being an Ackerman he could have a very strong explosive power. However, he can feel that all that strength was erased when he entered this body. Looking at the lifespan he would lose, Takashi didn't want to think about that at the moment. If he could use chakra and use it in swords and body, the physical strength of an Ackerman would not be lost at all, and now his surname could be used as a cover to cover his future combat power. After accepting all that, Takashi abnormally was very calm, which surprised him. Mr. Blouse sighed when he heard Takashi say that he would expel the titans from the surroundings, a little worried and yet relieved. Takashi's father brought him when he was only 2 years old to this village by the forest about 10 years ago and became a hunter, often hunting with him inside the forest before Maria Wall was breached by the titans. Just 2 years ago, in the year 845, the titans breached the Mary Wall, causing a large number of refugees to enter the Rose Wall. Eventually the way of life in the forest was restored, but the number of people greatly reduced the animals to hunt. One day, like any other, Takashi's father went into the forest to hunt and never returned after that, leaving him at the age of 10 to live alone. Now 2 years have passed. Takashi is 12 and old enough to join the army. It so happens that he also plans to let his daughter join the army, so he will send them together and they will take care of each other in the future. Thinking about all this, Mr. Blouse called out his daughter's name. Sasha, go out and greet Takashi, he will join the army together with you. It was then that Takashi looked at Sasha Blouse, who was hiding behind a tree in the courtyard. Sasha had wheat skin, amber brown eyes and reddish-brown hair pulled back in a ponytail with a fringe and 2 front locks on the sides. She has a slender body and usually wears a medieval dress in her spare time. A surprise to be in the same town as Sasha. Takashi thought to himself with a slight smile. Sasha, who was hiding behind a tree and was silently watching Takashi, when she heard her father's words, approached a bit embarrassed. Hi, I'm Sasha Blouse, let's watch our backs in the future. Takashi couldn't help but smile and said, Sasha, we have seen each other very often, don't talk so formally when you address me in the future. This. I'm sorry. Sasha was a little embarrassed, not knowing what to say incoherently. Seeing this, Mr. Blouse got a headache and could no longer hesitate. Even if the old ways are left, he had to agree to let his daughter go to the army to seek a better future. He wanted to do it last year, but he was a little reluctant, but now he really has a determined mind. His daughter has been in the forest for too long, and it's hard to communicate normally with other people, and recently there are very few prey. Some people really can't afford to support their own food enthusiast daughter. Mr. Blouse coughed slightly and his expression became serious. Sasha, pack your luggage today and go join the army with Takashi in a few days. Just when the old village chief is going to buy some supplies outside, you can go with him and get to the recruiting place quickly. Sasha puffed up her face and was not so polite to her father. Humph. Just until now, just in time to be a soldier and have enough to eat and not let you work on other things. She had had a fight with her father the other day, arguing with him about whether to abandon the hunting tradition, accept government supplies and raise horses. So even without Takashi, in the end she would be sent to serve as a soldier to help her family. Seeing his daughter's annoyed look, Mr. Blouse could do nothing, turned his head and said to Takashi, Takashi, you are usually smart. Please take care of my stupid daughter after going to the training corps. Don't worry, Uncle Blouse, I will take care of her and I think she will be someone well liked by everyone in the corps. Takashi replied with a smile. Who are you calling an idiot? Take out that piece of barbecue and apologize. Sasha grabbed her father's hand angrily. If he doesn't send her to the army this time, she won't be able to have some leftover food at home. When Takashi arrived home, his sweet home was just a simple log cabin. Looking around, there was almost no furniture, giving it a very poor appearance. Well, at least I'm not unsure of surviving the future. Takashi showed a bitter smile, not knowing what to do. After a few days, Takashi prepared to travel. He had nothing to pack as his things were very few. A few moments ago he was able to buy some good clothes, dry food and a bag of water, leaving himself with some money for the trip. This was all due to the bear he hunted a few days ago and only got some money after selling it. Thanks to that bear, he can eat well for 2 days and has bought at least decent clothes for his trip. Only after a few days, Takashi felt natural and knew his intentions in trying to hunt a bear. At night, Takashi began to practice the basic training method for channeling chakra. Although the world he is in now is different from where this energy came from, the effect, although slower and less effective, is still functional. Although he could not form a chakra to use elemental abilities, it would be enough to increase his physical strength and attacks by infusing the energy into specific points of his body. When he arrived in this world, he carried in his mind a very basic training method to begin moving chakra within his body, in addition to the information from his eyes which he set aside for the time being. It was said that all living individuals naturally produced chakra to some degree. Contained in the chakra coils that surround everything and connect to each organ of chakra production, the energy circulates throughout the body in a network called the chakra circulation system. In Naruto, certain groups, such as the ninja, have learned to generate more chakra and release it outside their bodies through their chakra points, or tenketsu, in order to perform special techniques, called jutsu. However, Takashi knew that in reality the use of chakra in the Titan world was not so magnificent. He could not beat a Titan with just a few physical blows. Still, if the chakra is attached to a metal blade, at least it will be easier to cut a Titan, and it is better than nothing considering that this was not his main weapon in this world. After 2 hours, the practice is complete. Takashi knew that 1 hour a day is enough. However, to heal his wounds in a faster way, the training method is essential. But if he trained it longer he would possibly also lose lifespan considering the strict rules of his gift. Thinking about the Titans that have no effective vital signs except the back of his neck, Takashi still hesitated to face them if he didn't have a Susanoo that in critical moments he would use it to save his life. But even so, he was hesitant to use it lightly at the thought of the lifespan he would lose. So he would only face Titans in normal cases with a 3-dimensional maneuvering device. According to his speculation, he could kill some Titans with a height of 3 to 4 meters at most with a knife. For those Titans of 7 or 8 meters, or even a dozen meters more, they could only escape without any other device. Chakra in this place has nothing but a powerful imaginary use in this world. It can't cut a Titan with one hand or a cut from a sword from afar. Takashi believed that even if the chakra is attached to an arrow, the effect will be lost when it exceeds 20 meters. The bow and arrow are useless for Titans, so he still has to rely on the unique technology in this world, a 3-dimensional maneuvering equipment. Indeed, science is the most powerful. The main force to kill Titans is well deserved, and the rest is in your own skills. Chapter 3, The Beginning of the Journey. The next day, Takashi had begun his journey of no return, as he had decided a few days ago upon learning how helpless he would be in his future days as a human in this world. With him was Sasha, the two of them sitting in a humble carriage on their way to enroll in the training corps. The one driving the carriage was an old man in a blue-gray coat and a kind face with affable manners. The village where Takashi and Sasha meet is called Dorpa. It is located in the southern part of the Rose Wall. It is a hunting village with a small number of people in the mountains far from the village more at the edge of the forest. As the village chief, today the old man went to town to help the villagers buy some necessities like oil and salt, so he took Takashi and Sasha along the way. The training corps was stationed in the area south of the Rose Wall. In the convertible carriage, Takashi looked at Sasha Blouse, getting to know her more closely. You can't say this girl is attractive, but she's cute in a way, still. In the end she's just a girl who likes food in her general description. Maybe it was because he wouldn't be able to see his daughter for a long time. Mr. Blouse prepared Sasha a big package full of food, which contained bread, boiled sweet potatoes and a piece of meat. After an hour of traveling, Sasha did not talk to Takashi, she just ate and ate again with no intention of stopping. Looking at this whole scene, Takashi felt that he was a little hungry. At that moment, he was also remembering the plot of Attack on Titan. When he was still of low means in his previous life, he followed the whole animated drama closely and enthusiastically. However, after coming to this world he could not remember beyond only 20 episodes of the series. He was a bit lost about it. He could only speculate that it was about the entity that sent him to this world in the first place. He only remembered when the female Titan was chasing the exploration corps, but after the brilliant trap the chase stopped. Now he was conflicted about not being able to access all his memories of this world. He also vaguely remembered how Captain Levi saved Eren without clearly knowing who the titans threatening the walls were. Besides, he had experienced many things in his life and had spent a lot of time anyway. Even though he was a true fan, he had forgotten many details. Takashi could now only rely on the Mangekyo Sharingan. He knew that the power of his eyes was classified into 4 different forms. In the first form, his Susanoo manifested a skeletal torso of energy that completely protected him from strong attacks, and this reduced Takashi's lifespan by 3 years every time he used it. The second form was somewhat different. His Susanoo manifests arms and a skull, granting him powerful protective defense as well as manipulation of his arms. But Takashi's lifespan is reduced by 9 years each time he uses that form. For the third form, here things start to get interesting. The Susanoo in this part can manifest by covering the skeletal body of the second phase with muscles, also covering it with a mask. Maybe this form can beat any titan for the most part, but the life that is reduced left Takashi freezing. 18 years are what will be reduced from his life by using it. And for the fourth form, Takashi's Susanoo manifests in its full form, reaching a size unimaginable for any titan on Earth. Such is its power, that Takashi's life will be reduced by 36 years when using it. And there was something interesting. To invoke a characteristic weapon of the Susanoo, Takashi's life will be reduced by 4 years for each use of a specific weapon. Having 12 years in this body, he possibly has no more than 75 years of useful life left to live. If he uses the fourth form 3 times, he would die without being able to live in this new world. What kind of nonsense are his gifts if they are modified like that? Thinking about it now, Takashi vaguely remembers that the Titan shifters only live 12 years at the moment they inherit the Titan, and although he didn't remember how many Titans there were, only from the first ones that were presented in the story and of which he remembers, Takashi counted 4 plus the female Titan. So now Takashi is reluctant to use the powerful Susanoo in this world. Another important point is that the characteristic strength of an Ackerman was taken from his body when he awoke in this world, leaving him alone with limited use of chakra and a Susanoo that dooms him to live less years in every minuscule use he makes. Takashi covered his face. He sighed, carelessly. Who knew he would come to this extremely dangerous world? Sasha looked at Takashi, who was covering his head with a weak face, finally stopped eating sweet potatoes and asked uncertainty that. Takashi, does your head hurt? You hurt your head just 2 days ago and you need a good rest. Sasha hesitated for a moment, then broke the sweet potato he was eating in half and handed it to him. Eat more, so you won't have a headache during the trip. What? Takashi took half of the sweet potato with a puzzled face. Was there some inevitable connection between eating and curing headaches? He tried to take a bite, and wow, it tasted pretty good. It was delicious. Sasha looked at Takashi, who had eaten the potato, and showed a cute smile. She gained a bit of self-confidence and felt that it wasn't that hard to get along with others, so she would have a friend in the future. Well, although she already knew him from a long time ago, Takashi didn't know that he became the first friend in Sasha's eyes. He was just thinking about Sasha, who was a very kind girl matching his description of her personality. Come to think of it, Sasha is a character apparently very important to the plot. There were some scenes where he knew nothing tragic happened, but indescribably he felt a little sadness in his heart. Looking at Sasha, who was still stuffing food into her mouth, Takashi finally couldn't help but ask, Sasha, are you still hungry? Sasha's a little embarrassed and said, sorry, I haven't had enough to eat in a long time. After the fall of Mary's Wall 2 years ago and the influx of refugees in the surrounding area, I was often hungry. The forest inside Rose's wall has recovered a lot. He was also a hunter, so he must know that prey was dwindling in number due to the settlements around the forest of inhabitants who migrated from Mary Wall. Nodding with compression, Takeshi said, "Of course, if it weren't for the absence of prey, I wouldn't have to go into the forest and almost get killed by that bear." That's right, the prey is getting harder and harder to catch, otherwise, the original Takeshi will not die. His father was also killed by a wild animal when he went into the forest long ago. Of course, that animal was eventually killed by Uncle Blouse and his companions. Otherwise, the Takeshi of the past would also go to take revenge on whatever would have killed his father. Sasha's eyes lit up and she looked at Takeshi with some admiration. "I heard you killed that bear a few days ago, you are someone amazing." Takeshi smiled with a bit of pride. At the end of the day, past actions helped him a lot in the future. The village where he lived is very remote. It took more than 2 hours for the carriage to reach the nearest town, and on the way, besides chatting with the old man for a while, Sasha enjoyed his meal again. The amount of food in the packet Mr. Blouse gave him was enough to eat 3 meals per person, and he ended up eating about the same amount of food in one meal. It was scary, no wonder Mr. Blouse wanted to send her to be a soldier. The training corps seemed to have no salary according to Takeshi, but they were covered with food. When the village arrived, the wheels stopped turning. The old village chief smiled and looked at the 2 people who were looking curiously at the carriage. "Boys, here we are. You have to train hard when you are about to become soldiers. Don't embarrass our village." Takeshi responded immediately, looking at Sasha who was still eating, and said helplessly, "Sasha, we are here, it's time to get off." "Please wait a moment, I'll finish soon." Sasha was a little anxious and said as she shoved a fistful of food into her mouth. "This girl." Takeshi, a bit annoyed, reached out and grabbed the bag where it contained the rest of Sasha's food, jumped out of the carriage and ran forward. "Sasha, if you don't catch up to me, I'll eat the rest of your food." Sasha blanched in shock, holding a bag of seeds in her left hand, picking up the bag of clothes in her right hand and nimbly jumped out of the carriage. She immediately gave chase, shouting as she chased after it, "Takeshi, wait, don't eat it all, I'm right behind you." Seeing the 2 people running further and further, the speed was very fast. The old village leader smiled, shook his head, and said excitedly, "It's good to be young, I hope they can survive in this horrible world." After chasing Takeshi for a while, Sasha finally got her food back. She couldn't help but complain, "Hey, Takeshi, I thought we were friends. Let's sign up early, registration will be over in 2 days, next time you'll have a delicious meal without being disturbed." Takeshi shrugged his shoulders. "This feeling is good." Sasha's eyes immediately lit up. "Thank you, this is what you said, you can't steal my food." After walking for about 2 hours, Takeshi and Sasha arrived at the base of the training regiment, a small valley on the southern side of the Rose Wall. The valley is shaped like a basin, with earthen walls on 3 sides, and 2 wide granite turnouts on the other side of the slope, which are the main roads leading to the towns in the outer regions. In the afternoon, Takeshi and Sasha arrived at the registration room. The registration time was less than a week. This was the 4th day and it was relatively late, so there was no one in the registration office. What caught his attention was a bald black man. A middle-aged man in military uniform was sitting behind a desk. After looking at the 2 of them, he took 2 watches from the desk. "Fill in your identity information," and then fill out this form to get 2 sets of training uniforms. Someone will arrange accommodation later, remember not to cause trouble. Understood? Takashi and Sasha completed the form, then went to the warehouse to pick up 2 sets of uniforms and said their goodbyes. He walked toward the boys' dormitory. The housing conditions of the training corps were not very good. After all, it was a group of recruits, with 4-person rooms, 8-person rooms, 12-person rooms, and large collective dormitories. Takashi was lucky and was assigned a quadruple room. He quietly entered his room and looked down. The floor was clean and tidy, and had been cleaned. Obviously, someone had been living in these last few days. The 2 bunk beds had a total of 4 beds. Seeing that there was an empty lower bunk, Takashi naturally smiled and threw his luggage on the bed. At that moment, someone pushed the door and entered. Takashi turned his head to look, and his face was stunned. This was a pretty girl with blonde hair, blue eyes and a cute look. Takashi cleared his throat and said politely, "Hey, you made a mistake, the girls' dormitory is on the other side." The person who entered was stunned for a moment and said with a somewhat embarrassed expression, "Well, I'm actually a man." "What?" Takashi stared at the young man in front of him in astonishment. He looked at her neck carefully and found Adam's apple. "I'm Takashi Ackerman, I was assigned this dorm to sleep in. Please share any problems." Takashi replied, a little embarrassed. Just now he mistook a man for a woman in his vague memories. The blonde boy was a little surprised. He replied, "I'm alert, let's be good friends." "Well, Takashi's expression is a bit strange, this seems to be someone very similar to a girl named Krista. Would teaming up with him be beneficial?" Takashi wondered silently. However, this doesn't seem to work in the future. Even the halo of Eren Giga's protagonist can't protect him as well, as far as he knew. In short, he must be careful. Without interacting with anymore, Takashi shrugged off the men and lay down on his bed. After a while, a boy possessing fair skin, grey eyes and black hair with a bitter expression entered. Eren Yaja, a protagonist destined for the horrors of this world, has a childhood friend, good friends in the future and special powers, but that can't stop him from feeling worse and worse in the future. It's not that he's weak, but it's a cruel world and even with Takashi's strength it's impossible to save everyone. At least Takashi is aware that humans are at an absolute disadvantage, it will be difficult to make friends that possibly in the future he will lose. Chapter 4, The Instructor's Harsh Words. In the evening, Takashi had already interacted with the main protagonist of this world named Eren Giga. Both greeted each other nicely, so now they already knew each other. After some time, another young man with a small blonde haircut entered the room, introduced himself to Takashi as Thomas Wagner, and now the 4 people were gathered in the bedroom chatting amicably. Next, according to Takashi's understanding, they would live here for 3 long years until they completed their training. To be honest, Takashi had no idea who Thomas was in the original story. Even with characters as important as was, he had trouble identifying him correctly, but since Thomas was now his roommate, he at least hoped that he would be stronger than at first and live much longer. In such a world, this is already a blessing for someone who was entering the Corps no matter where they go at the end of training. Damn, how do I get this belt on correctly? The pants don't fit as well as I'd like. Eren tried on the uniform with a worried expression. It was really troublesome to wear the training corps uniform for the first time, especially those belts that were really hard to put on. But these belts in the end could not be removed. In the future, By using the three-dimensional maneuvering device, these belts will help to adjust the posture and control the balance in the air of the body in an ideal way. Takashi adjusted the belts all over his body in an ideal way and then put on the rest of the uniform slowly. Just as he finished, he looked at Eren and said, "Eren, don't worry, I already put on the uniform according to the instructions. It should be the right way to wear it. I will teach you." This is also Takashi's first time wearing this uniform, but patiently and neatly and adjusting the uniform slowly to his body. Seeing Eren in trouble, he happily helped someone he admires a lot. "Great, I'm going crazy." Eren was a little happy to hear that someone was offering to help him. He had been trying to put on his uniform for as long as 10 minutes. During that period of time, the belt on his legs was adjusted wrong several times and he had lost what little patience he had. The current Eren is a bit irritable. Well, even Takashi would lose patience if he didn't succeed in something that in the future would be as normal for him as putting on underpants. On the other hand, Armin, having finished putting on his uniform and seeing that his friend Eren was being helped by Takashi, turned to Thomas and slowly explained to him how to dress properly. When he finished, Thomas scoffed at himself and said, "I'm so excited to be able to be a soldier, but now I can't even naturally figure out the proper way to dress in uniform." Looking at them now, the talent gap is too big. Folks, please don't tell others what happened today, for me it's too embarrassing. Thomas has a gentle and informal personality, and is a good person to get along with. Which is why no one in the room had any intention of bothering him. Under Takashi's careful explanation, Eren finally put on the standard uniform of the core training soldier and his mood seemed once again full of energy and said, "Don't worry, I have no intention of doing something like that to a comrade." The four of them chatted for a while longer, and Thomas prepared a pot of black coffee that he brought from home with hot water and poured a cup for everyone. Takashi had naturally become accustomed to this very calm and relaxing environment, having tasted black coffee, and surprisingly it tasted very good. Thomas explained that he was a native of the hinterlands of the Trist district. So he knew very little about what happened on the Maria Wall. "What do you want to become soldiers for?" Thomas finally asked, putting down his cup. "To see the outside world," Armin replied casually. "To kill all the damn titans," Eren said briskly. Takashi could notice an obvious hatred in the tone of his voice. After all, few people can keep their cool after what Eren experienced when the wall in his city was torn down. When Takashi felt everyone's gaze on his body, he smiled calmly and said, "Well, I've always felt helpless when I hear people talking about titans. To be honest, I'd rather learn how to kill titans than wait for my death inside the walls that will most likely in the future be torn down again. The one way to win and live peacefully, is to kill them all, exterminate them." Eren was stunned and together with Armin looked at each other in surprise. It was so rare that someone would have this idea. Takashi knew that Eren wanted to join the exploration corps to kill the titans and in a way avenge his mother's death, fulfilling his own goal at the same time. But Takashi's words were much simpler to digest, visualizing a goal that was always in the minds of all the soldiers facing the titans. However, Eren and Armin felt that Takashi's intentions were nothing more than that, simply personally seeking the world he wants to live in. In fact, the original Takashi also had the idea of joining the exploration corps to expel the titans, as his father was killed by the influence of the refugees and the hardships of the hunt, so he could only blame this damn complicated world. The essential reason for all these events is that the titans broke down the Mary Wall and humans lost a lot of territory, rich land where many people lived comfortably. It's just that the Takashi of the past had bad luck and died before he could be recruited into the Exploration Corps. And after Takashi thought about the incredible power he possessed, his mind would not leave him alone if he just stood on the sidelines doing absolutely nothing for what was now the future of his world. He doesn't really understand the world, but he is much better than ordinary people. He can't be a coward. If he doesn't work hard now, nothing will assure him that he can survive. No matter how powerful the giant is, he has to fight the titans and learn before it's too late. He can't rely on his Susanoo alone. He still didn't want to expose that ability that takes years off his lifespan when he uses it. Takashi was a bit surprised. He came on the 4th day he signed up. He stayed here for 2 more days, not that he wasn't interested in talking to others, let alone anyone with the same goal as him. After hearing his ambitions, it would be polite if he didn't ridicule him for his fierce desires. Takashi, why do you believe in that dream? From your words you seem to be from the Rose Wall, don't you? Armin asked curiously. I am a hunter. After my father died 2 years ago, I lived alone. The only forest I have now has gradually disappeared. I have no home. And it would bother me to live locked in a wall from which I only wait in fear for my unfortunate death. If I can do something, I am willing to do anything so that someone else does not suffer from hunger, forced migrations and in terror. That's right, he has no home. Whether it's the original Takashi or the current Takashi, he's the type of person who has no intention of waiting around, knowing that his help, however small, would make a change for the future. Of course, he can't talk about his own past life issues, so Takashi told them some of the original body's experiences in this life. You said you hunted alone when you were 10 years old, and it's been 2 years. Thomas was a little surprised. He didn't know how to hunt, but he knew how hard it was when he thought about it, especially now that the forest area had shrunk considerably. Eren and Armin also looked at Takashi in surprise. As they were less than 12 years old, they actually lived in a wasteland for 2 years before coming to this place. Although life for everyone is hard, it's better to have food supply anyway, than to find food from time to time in the forest. Takashi smiled proudly and said nothing. The original owner of this body was very strong and brave. Even with the help and care of the villagers, it was very difficult for a 10-year-old boy to hunt and make a living alone, let alone live in an independent way. Some people have done their best to live, and he is also one of those people. He, a traveler, actually admired him. Takashi died for his stubbornness and his decision to enter the forest as a hunter. If perhaps he had chosen to stay at home, his fate would not have been death. Then let's work together and train hard to join the Exploration Corps. Eren said excitedly, extending his hand to the sky with a clenched fist. It's decided. Takashi clenched fists with Eren and they agreed to fight together in the future. Although it seems like just kid talk, the two are serious in their hearts. In fact, this time is the first time Takashi makes an analysis of his real age. Takashi is only 12 years old, and he remembers being no more than 18 in his previous life. Although he comes from another world, he is still a teenager. Coupled with the fact that he has read fewer books, he cannot be said to be mature. Many people don't know that they came to an agreement the first day they met, although their starting points were very different. Scouting Corps Commander Eren Jiga, there is only one subject in our objective: freedom. Free. Free. Commander Jiga, you mean there is no negotiation? Takashi asked with a dejected look. There is not, Recruit Ackerman. Eamon was a little happy for Eren, but Thomas just smiled and said nothing. Joining the exploration corps or something, he still felt a little crazy on the simple idea of his new friends. How could humans defeat titans? Of course it's hard for ordinary people to defeat titans, but only monsters in a human's body can try. After thinking about that, Thomas just smiled awkwardly. The next day, the instructors talked about some topics such as uniforms, standing posture, etc. In the training camp, the most important thing was the give the heart salute, that is, the right hand in fist and the fingers were raised in front of the left chest right in front of the heart. Takashi looked at the training field surrounded by craters. There were about 300 people around, which gave him a feeling of oppression and pride. Today is the last day to register. The training has not started yet. Tomorrow there will be a joining ceremony for the recruits. After the joining ceremony is over, they will immediately enter training mode. There are only 2 days off at the end of a month, which can be called only as devil training. The elimination rate, disability rate and mortality rate are relatively high. To put it bluntly, it is not bad that there are people in their early 20s who graduate successfully. The training corps is also an army, not a place to play. Soldiers trained here are capable of fighting titans, of course. Whether they have the courage to enter the Scout Corps after graduating is another matter. In short, the training is very strict and everyone should take it seriously. Just now, the intimidating-looking instructor with slightly brown skin who calls himself Keith Shades said he would train his group of boys and girls hard, and let Takashi and the others know what military training is. There was nothing extra to do today. Takashi made the bed, Thomas was in his top bunk, Eren on the other side was also in the bottom bunk. Eren's good friend, the lovely boy Armin, was Eren's top bunk. The 4 of them went back to cleaning the small dormitory. They were lucky, many people had to squeeze into the large collective dormitory. The next day, the sky was clear and the sun was shining brightly. On the training grounds there were about 317 training in uniform, lined up in a square and standing on the large playground. Today is the regimental induction ceremony. After today, they will officially begin training. More than a dozen instructors stood in front of the crowd, and then a middle-aged man with a bald head in military uniform walked to the high platform, looked at the recruits and said loudly, "Today is the 104th recruit induction ceremony, and I am Keith Shades, the unfortunate one who was sent to supervise you. I tell you, I don't welcome you at all. You are now just a lamb of the herd, food for titans. We will spend 3 years training you and teaching you to fight titans. After 3 years, standing in front of titans, will you still be food, or will you become the wall of fame protecting the king, or will you get the glory of driving out the titans? It's up to all of you to decide." After Instructor Keith finished speaking, he asked some trainers who had seen titans devouring people to stand up and step aside. Takashi looked at him. There were about 20 people, all of whom had seen the horror of the titans, including Eren and Mikasa. As for the remaining nearly 300 people, sorry, soon Instructor Keith will doubt your true determination. Chapter 5, Who the hell do you think you are? Under the scorching sun, a long hour passed without any one of the more than 300 recruits moving from the place. Without breaking formation, everyone stood for a full hour without moving. After the instructor who claimed to be Keith Shades said some opening remarks, he turned on the scolding mode for all those plants that were very tender at first sight. He will train the soldiers one by one, and those who only come to look for new experiences are not worthy to be in the same place as the others. Takashi, all he heard from the instructor Shades was, "We are going to be eaten by titans." But knowing part of the story, he doesn't think those words are in jest. His choice of vocabulary, the way he educates with just a few simple words is incredible. At first, Takashi knew that this part of the anime only lasted a few simple minutes, but in fact, except for a few people who have seen hell after the fall of the Shiganshina wall, everyone without exception must be scolded again and without any care. There are more than 300 people in this place. It takes more than minutes for a recruit to be scolded by the instructor. Takashi looked at Instructor Keith Shades with admiration in his eyes. It has been about an hour since he started yelling non-stop and with a straight posture. Doesn't he need to rest or drink water? However, those questions in Takashi's mind were immediately answered by the actions of the bald Instructor Keith, who next moment took out a bag of water and sipped a big gulp, moistening his dry throat. When everyone thought this hell was over, Keith Shades had no intention of stopping. He continued to spray saliva wildly. Oh, this welcoming rite is something essential for everyone. This time the next to be the subject of words was Amin, who followed in the long list this time. This is more than important. For young men who don't even have the willpower to stay here after a few small words from the instructor, they are not even ideal to become good soldiers. Takashi thought silently. Since the truth comes disguised with a hidden cloak, Takashi interpreted that Instructor Keith was shouting to everyone, if you can't stand this, you can leave and live a few more years in peace and quiet. You won't even be cannon fodder for the Titans, on the contrary, you only hinder the other recruits. Keith looked at Amin with a grim face and roared fiercely, you there, who are you? Sir. Amin's body trembled and he immediately made a military salute with his right hand on his left breast, and then answered loudly the next moment, I am Amin alert from Shiganshina, sir. Hearing that, Instructor Keith just scoffed and sneered, is that so? Your name sounds stupid. Did your parents give it to you? Amin was a bit startled by Keith's fierce expression and replied in a cold sweat, it was my grandfather who chose that name for me, sir. Tell me alert, why do you want to join us? To help humanity win, sir. Instructor Keith said with great disdain, really? That's wonderful, then I'll turn you into big-time food for the Titans. Then, Instructor Keith twisted Amin's head with his left hand and turned around, third squad. Half turn. Takashi just watched all this in silence. Soon enough, it would be his turn to be scolded. Suddenly, he felt a vague memory of being scolded by the principal at school. To be honest, now he was really nervous. Would he, an ordinary human from a world where until recently he considered Titans to be more than fiction, be good enough to hunt down those giant, people-eating Titans? Takashi didn't know, but what he did know was that he didn't plan on dying or waiting for a protagonist to save him. What if in this world the protagonist doesn't emerge victorious like the others? This is hell in life, he couldn't depend on anyone but himself to keep him safe. Without pausing for a moment, the water-sipping Instructor Keith spat spittle in front of the recruits, walked aggressively toward the next yellow-haired, thick-browed boy named Thomas, who was the good friend he met recently and who slept in Takashi's upper bunk. And you, who the fuck are you? The yellow-haired boy with a submissive expression thumped his chest and saluted, replying somewhat nervously, "SE sir. I'm Thomas Wagner from Trust, sir." Say it louder. "I am Thomas Wagner of Trust, sir." "I still can't hear you, come back and tell me who you are when I can talk like a man." Not far away, another senior instructor like Keith and a young instructor from the training corps passed in front of the 4th Squadron. The silver-haired, bespectacled senior instructor chuckled and said to the young instructor a few steps behind him, "There it is again, you had to go through this too when you enlisted in the corps, didn't you? The young instructor said with a blank stare. That's right, sir. It really is kind of nostalgic to witness it again. Even now, he couldn't understand why Instructor Keith Shades was yelling at them all like that. Tell me now, who are you? Keith Shades asked a slender-looking recruit. Carolina Miner of Karen's. You're not. You were born in a pigsty and you're not even worth cattle. Yes, sir. I was born in a pigsty and I'm not even worth cattle. Here I'm the one who decides what you are and aren't. Yes, sir. Miner Carolina was a young woman of slender body and short stature. Her hair was black, voluminous, short, and she wore the ends tied by two light blue ribbons. Her eyes were gray, considerably large. The young, blank-eyed instructor was also puzzled. When he was a training soldier, he had never received such intense scolding, so he asked. What's the point of scaring them like that? What does the instructor want to try? The silver-haired instructor smiled and said as he walked, this is a rite. It completely destroys the memories of what they once were and rebuilds them as soldiers starting from scratch. It's a turning point for them. Fourth squad. Turn around. The young instructor was still a bit puzzled. When he saw Instructor Keith walk past some people, he didn't lecture them like he did the others. There are some people he doesn't say anything to. The silver-haired instructor turned his head to look at the recruits who were not lectured by the instructor and said, for those who have already gone through the rite, there is no need to say much. They have probably experienced hell 2 years ago, and their expressions are obviously different from those of other children. Very few are aware of the hell they will face later on, and for those who have already lived through that hell, they have nothing to hear from Keith. Well, come on, let's leave it at Keith. After speaking, the silver-haired instructor and the young instructor walked to other, more secluded places. And here, Instructor Keith walked up to a dark-haired boy and looked at him fiercely. What's your name? The boy is moderately tall, with a wiry but muscular build at the same time. With auburn hair color, he placed his right hand on his left breast and said calmly, I'm Gene Kirstein from Trust. Seeing Gene's calm expression, the instructor asked, what are you doing here? His voice was so loud that Gene was startled when he was shouted at, but he quickly returned to normal and chuckled, my wish is to join the military police and live in the inner city. All the trainers beside him looked with surprise at this boy who was confident that he was going to live in the inner city. Many people think like that, but few are as straightforward as this young man. Well. Instructor Keith's face darkened and he said with a sneer, so you want to live in the inner city? Yes. Replied Gene Kirstein happily, thinking that the instructor in front of him agreed with his choice. At this point Takashi could only say that he was too naive. Boom. With a muffled sound, he was greeted by a headbutt from Instructor Keith. What? Gene fell to the ground clutching his nose in pain. As we all know, the nose is the organ of smell and is the main access route for air in and out of the lungs, being a painful place to be hit without care. Instructor Keith just smiled coldly and said, who told you to kneel? You'll never make it into the police regiment if it's that easy to knock me down. Completely ignoring Gene sitting on the ground, Instructor Keith approached the next soldier in training, who was still a boy. And who are you and what are you doing here? The boy had some freckles on his face and looked very honest and obedient. When Instructor Keith shouted at him, he suddenly became nervous. I'm Marco Bot from Genie of the Rose Wall, sir. I came here so I could join the military police and be able to follow the king's orders. Is that so? Instructor Keith narrowed his eyes, smiled sinisterly and said, that seems like a noble beginning, good boy. Halfway through speaking, Instructor Keith's face suddenly came close to Marco's face, looking at him with a grim expression, but always remember that the king does not want you by his side. They are all different but very identical to the anime illustration. I can slowly remember their faces and names. Takashi thought to himself. Marco Bot's face turned pale, sweating profusely. Instructor Keith turned and walked away. Time passed slowly. Numerous recruits spoke in front of Keith, and Takashi, as well as the others, had to wait until it was all over. Soon, Instructor Keith approached a boy with short shaved hair and an almost bald head, and roared fiercely at him. "What's your name, son?" The thin, short boy was a little flustered, clenched his left fist tightly and pressed it against his right breast, and replied loudly, "Connie Springer. Born in Ragako, on the south side of Rose's Wall, sir." Twist. Connie's body was lifted by Instructor Keith with her head between her palms, and her eyes formed slanted triangles gazing at the young man between her palms at all times. Connie naturally uttered a groan of pain. "Listen to me very carefully, Connie Springer, I thought I had been too clear. That salute you are making symbolizes that you unconditionally offer your heart to our king. Is your heart on the right side, by any chance?" It's a bit funny, but Takashi is no longer in the mood to watch Connie's jokes and angrily reminds Sasha, "Sasha, don't eat, the instructor is coming." Sasha didn't stop eating the sweet potato and said vaguely, "It's okay, steamed sweet potato won't taste good when it's cold." Takashi covered his face. Sasha was going to be unlucky. What kind of punishment will his food-loving friend get? Boom, grunt. A crunching chewing sound suddenly came out, and Instructor Keith's face instantly turned ugly. He slowly turned his head and looked at the source of the sound. Takashi's body unconsciously stiffened. He knew all was lost now. His small attempts to stop Sasha had been for nothing. She was a girl with reddish-brown hair in a ponytail. Her big eyes only looked straight ahead, and at that moment she was holding a steaming sweet potato in her mouth. Eat and swallow like there was no one else. How shameless could Sasha be right now? Instructor Keith finally dropped Connie, who was drowning in his hands. He approached fiercely, and a cold voice came out of his teeth. "Hey, you! What the hell are you doing?" Sasha didn't seem to hear for a while. Her eyes looked around and she kept shoving food into her mouth for fear that someone would take her precious food away again. Takashi was speechless, along with the others' eyes widened in surprise. Being ignored, the veins on Instructor Keith's bald forehead popped. He was filled with anger. He walked towards the girl with the ponytail and shouted fiercely at her. "I'm talking to you, scum. Who do you think you are?" Sasha was slightly taken aback by Instructor Keith's sudden roar. She swallowed the mouthful of food in her mouth and made a military salute as she replied, "Sir, I'm Sasha Blouse from Dorper south of Rose Wall, sir." "Sasha Blouse, what are you holding in your right hand?" Instructor Keith asked Sasha with a calm face, waiting for an answer that would leave him in no doubt of Sasha Blouse's mental state. Sasha looked at Instructor Keith and answered matter-of-factly, "A steamed sweet potato, I found it a while ago in the kitchen, sir." "In short, did you steal this? Why are you eating it now?" Sasha looked at Instructor Keith and said without hesitation, "If they're not eaten hot, they're worthless, sir." This was the best possible decision. Well, maybe in Sasha's eyes, eating is more important. Instructor Keith looked at Sasha, his face as black as ink. "That beats me, why are you eating a potato?" Sasha was stunned for a moment and, according to his own understanding, asked, "Are you asking why people generally eat steamed potatoes?" Takashi couldn't help but laugh when he saw this. The two were chatting through hidden codes. Instructor Keith didn't speak with a gloomy face. Many people around heard this strange dialogue scene and looked at Sasha curiously. Ah! Sasha suddenly sighed, suddenly realized, she made a great determination, split the steamed sweet potato in half and handed half of it to Instructor Keith. Takashi, who knew her, knew that this decision was something Sasha rarely made. Here. I give you half. Sasha's face showed sharp pain, but she didn't back down from sharing her food. Instructor Keith unconsciously took half of the steamed sweet potato, a little unable to keep up with Sasha's thoughts. Takashi, who stood to the side, really couldn't contain his laughter. Covering his mouth with both hands, he couldn't help but hold back the fit of laughter escaping his lips. The half. Bald Keith said unconsciously. Sasha saw Instructor Keith take the steamed sweet potato and thought that he liked sweet potatoes too, and smiled a little stupidly for a moment. Instructor Keith suddenly flashed a fatherly smile. Sasha blouse, right. All right. When you run after you finish here, you'll run until you drop dead. Besides, since you love food so much, you'll run out of dinner. Ignoring Sasha with a shattered face, Instructor Keith approached Takashi. Kid, you laughed so hard just now, why is it so funny? Tell me something to please me so I won't kill you this instant. Chapter 6, I'm just a hunter. The Instructor Keith Shades looked at this young man who still kept a slight smile on his lips. Takashi is a tall young man of athletic figure with short dark black hair and bristled down, reaching a little below the ears. His eyes were the most special, they are black in color, which he apparently always keeps narrowed. Keith Shades could sense something different about this new recruit. When Takashi heard Instructor Keith Shades' question, he wiped the smile on his face and answered immediately with a military salute. I'm Takashi Ackerman, I grew up in Dorpa south of the Rose Wall. Instructor Keith snorted coldly, oh. That sweet potato girl's hometown. What are you doing here, eating sweet potatoes too? Ha ha. There was a burst of laughter all around. When Instructor Keith heard the mocking laughter, he just narrowed his eyes but said nothing. Takashi on his side was a bit stunned and his expression changed from seriousness to coldness. You're wrong, sir. I'm just a simple hunter. I came to this place not to feel helpless from the rumors and hardships of my life. My only goal is to learn everything necessary to slay titans. When I am prepared enough, I hope to hunt down the titans one by one until I finish all the prey in this world. Feeling the firmness in his words, Keith raised his eyebrows and said, well. Not bad at all, I hope you won't be so scared by then. After he finished speaking, he walked away, full of strength and with only one thought in his mind, that boy is different. Takashi's face became calm again. At first he didn't want to say anything arrogant, so as not to refute the words of Instructor Keith Shades. But on the other hand he wanted to leave an impression on everyone by saying, come and look at me, I will be someone great in the future. If you don't want to be trampled, train so hard that you can't move any muscle in your body at the end of the day. Takashi wanted to be a kind of conical steel tip, the tip of an arrow for future fights to come. But he also didn't want to be someone too arrogant. He didn't want to imagine that once he was in front of a titan his hands would shake and he would be so scared that his punches would be ineffective when attacking. For now, he had to hate the titans and think only of how to eliminate them. In battle, victory cannot depend on arrogance alone, so he needed his training skills to surpass the rest of the recruits around him. You could say that as an instructor, Keith Shades was someone who also failed to achieve anything significant on the front lines as a Scout Corps soldier. But Takashi Ackerman was different. Not only did he know the early events of this world, but he also knew that it wasn't just the Titans who were his enemies. There was someone else on the walls, outside or inside, who could transform just like Eren Jiga did. So, in order to win, Takashi needed to find them all and use the power of the Mangekyo Sharingan to slay them all at once. Takashi didn't care about their intentions. He is inside the walls, and anyone who threatens his safety will be his main enemies in this world. More than an hour passed. With the exception of the 20 or so people who did not need to be trained, the other almost 300 people had already been scolded by Instructor Keith. The right for everyone to become good soldiers was over. Instructor Keith took another sip of water, feeling somewhat dissatisfied with the results. He walked to the high platform in front of the training soldiers and said coolly, "New recruits, the joining ceremony is over. Are you relieved to be able to become a formal training soldier? Isn't it?" The training soldiers who had just relaxed in the audience were silent for a moment, realizing that things were not that simple. Instructor Keith took 2 steps forward and said expressionlessly, "Well, for the rest of you, your day is not over yet. You will have a competition at 4 o'clock this afternoon where you will all have a race. The last 5 to finish 200 laps will be ejected from this place. Sasha Blouse, you will run until you pass out." Instructor Keith paused for a moment and then roared in a loud voice, "Pack your own bags and leave if you don't think you have the qualifications to pass this test. We don't want any waste here." God, did I hear right? 200 laps in the field. That's too cruel. He'll kill us before we start the real training. Damn it, we have to eliminate 5 people before the real training starts. The soldiers training under the stage suddenly muttered and grumbled under their breath. This is the first day of joining the regiment. Is it really good to kick them out like that? Takashi also felt bad. On the other hand, Sasha was holding his hand with tears in his eyes. "Takashi, please help me and get me something for dinner or I will starve to death." Only then did Sasha know why Instructor Keith said to let her run until she just passed out or died, and she had to keep running with the others 200 laps without being in the last 5 places. But out of everything, for her the most important thing, she would run out of dinner. Takashi's mouth twitched. Can people starve to death if they don't eat a meal? That it's impossible. As a good friend and companion, he still had to do Sasha this favor. "Okay, I'll save you some food for dinner." Sasha's eyes lit up, looking at Takashi as if he was looking at delicious bread, and he said gratefully, "Thank you, you're a good friend." "Well, it's nothing." Takashi thought with embarrassment as he saw everyone's gazes turn towards him and Sasha. In the dining room just before the race started, Takashi grabbed some bread and cold sweet potatoes, storing more food for Sasha to have his dinner. He also prepared a light soup and sat down to eat next to Thomas. As for why the two didn't sit with Eren Jiga and Mikasa, he was really sorry. He wasn't in the habit of being too attached to people. This time the protagonist took Mikasa Ackerman and Amin Alert to lunch together, a good friend and a cute Ackerman. Takashi under no circumstances wanted to be a burden or be intense, it was not his style. By the way, Takashi and Mikasa have been in light contact in the last 2 days since he met Eren Jiga. He found that it wasn't hard to get along with that cold-looking girl and her inseparable self Eren Jiga. Even Mikasa asked for Takashi's father's name, but was surprised to have never heard Takashi's father's name. It all seemed pretty normal, didn't it? Takashi didn't think much that his father and Mikasa Ackerman could be related since he had all the memories of the old Takashi Ackerman, but he never heard of any long-lost relatives of his father. Although the surname is the same, there are possibly hundreds of Akamans in the world, it would be impossible for them all to be known relatives. Sitting across from Takashi, Thomas, who was drinking his vegetable soup with a spoon, asked, "Takashi, aren't you worried about the afternoon race? The last 5 will be eliminated." "You mustn't worry, it's only 200 laps, keep steady and don't lose your breath." Takashi was very calm. Thomas was speechless. "Don't talk about the 200 laps like it's nothing, it's about 14 kilometers. It's not that Takashi doesn't care. Since he came to this world, he slowly learned the chakra training technique and the improvements in his physical body were noticeable. These 200 laps were possibly not much for him, but for others it would be hell. Takashi didn't remember that this training method was pointed out by the instructor Keith Shades. He only vaguely remembered that Sasha had been punished after the bonding ceremony, so possibly it was due to his last slightly off-color words towards the instructor. He didn't know why, but he firmly believed that instructor Keith hated special people. Perhaps he wanted to see firsthand who were special with this simple training. Of course, although he had trained his chakra, it had only been less than a week, and the strengthening of his body and chakra did not increase extravagantly. Because of this, he might have a bit of difficulty being the first to finish the 200 laps. However, he discovered that the potential of this body itself is very amazing. The physical quality of his body improved slightly every day, and this is not simply due to the effect of chakra. He thought about the sudden burst of power and control over his body on that day when he faced the bear. He knew that the initial potential of this body had been taken away, but apparently not entirely. The lineage of this person seems to be a bit powerful, considering that Mikasa Ackerman was also someone extraordinary. In the original series, Mikasa is so strong and talented that very few could match her power in battle. Perhaps it has something to do with her and the former Takashi's family in this world. Being interested, Takashi also asked Mikasa about this, but she didn't know anything about it. In general, Takashi's possible talent that was somehow taken away from him had just awakened less than a week ago, and Mikasa had done so more than 3 years ago, so Takashi thought that his power was not completely taken away from him, but was still developing. These thoughts flashed in Takashi's mind, but to think of the original Takashi's father as just a normal person, nothing special from the other world, leaves him very puzzled. Perhaps the original Takashi was granted this incredible talent. Regardless, now Takashi's body configuration was just fine. Perhaps if he trains hard as he had originally set out to do, he can surpass himself and become more powerful than even one other main character. Chakra, which is a bit unstable when using it, is not reliable at all. Even Takashi hesitates to be able to use it in swords and strikes against titans. In the afternoon, in the large training courtyard, more than 300 soldiers of the training corps were in the waiting field. Many of them looked a bit bitter. This place, it could not be called a lay. There is no smooth ground. The holes in the cement make it a much more uncomfortable place. There is only a small line drawn in front of them. Many crowded forward, hoping to grab a good place to start from. After all, there are over 300 people. Although the place is too spacious to accommodate them, it is impossible to make the competition run in an orderly fashion. However, as long as there is no fight, the instructor won't mind. It is a yard that possibly plus 200 means more than 20 kilometers. Takashi could imagine that it is impossible to complete for more than half of all the recruits. This led Takashi to a single thought: first of all, it wasn't a competition. Possibly, it will all come to an end when 5 soldiers from the training corps give up this dream of becoming a soldier. Somewhat logical and consistent considering the numbers, Sasha had been running for about an hour without stopping, which shows his strength and very strong physical endurance. Takashi is standing behind the crowd. Upon discovering the significance of this competition, he knew that it was not a competition of speed, but of will and determination. Moreover, he is very confident that he can finish the 200 laps if he is wrong in his assumptions. Starburst. An instructor shot a flare into the sky, and the crowd rushed forward like a tidal wave. The soldiers of the training corps rushed forward at full speed. Even if only the last 5 people to complete the 200 laps were ejected, they didn't want to end up behind. Takashi was in no hurry. He controlled the rhythm of his breathing and kept a steady speed in the middle of his squad. What's the hurry after all? They wouldn't die even if they failed the test. He looked to the front of his squadron and saw Jean, who was energetically leading the group, and Mikasa, who was silently following him. As for the other people next to him, they are unknown at the moment. Thomas is ahead of Takashi. Armin on his side was. Hey, what about Armin? Takashi looked for Armin and almost mistook him for that girl with similar hair. Some time later he discovered that he was right behind him. Well, in the series Armin's physical strength was not his strong point, but he would definitely not be eliminated in this test. Takashi's happy smile was discovered by a girl with a black hair with 2 pigtails at her sides. You seem to be very relaxed in this test. Why are you following our pace and not running faster? Takashi turned his head and looked at the pretty girl beside him. Don't worry, this is the 2nd lap. Don't talk and concentrate on keeping your breathing. Mina, who has 2 black-colored tails, was surprised and said quickly, well, I'm Mina Carolina. Thank you for worrying. I thought you would run much faster, although there is no reward for coming first. Many of the instructors are watching us. When Takashi heard the words Mina Carolina, he looked outside the field, and in fact, almost all the instructors came over to watch the performance of the new recruits. He just smiled and said, I'm Takashi Ackerman, don't worry, after 20 laps, many people should start to slow down, then it will be harder for them to keep their pace so fast. Mina chuckled, after 20 laps, won't you be exhausted too? Takashi shook his head and said nothing. If he kept his pace, pretending to be in an unremarkable position, he would always be in control of the whole scenario. Watching the soldiers of the training corps pretending to be fast, when in reality they are burning all their stamina in the first few laps. He didn't intend to pretend to be bad and then reveal his incredible physical condition. He just wanted to carry his own pace without worries. Chapter 7, The Feeling of Seeing Titans. Takashi was right. After 10 laps, many people seemed to be on the verge of collapse. After all, they are a group of teenagers between 12 and 13 years old who were running at full speed without weighing things properly, just for fear of being left behind and being kicked out. At lap number 15, Takashi stopped running at a normal speed and turned to Mina, see you. After saying that, Takashi increased his speed and chakra flowed along his body. His speed increased and he advanced steadily like a gust of wind. Carolina Mina stared at Takashi's back that was moving rapidly to the front and was speechless. If Takashi was about to increase his speed, he should naturally increase his speed without saying anything. Why did he look at me with a straight face while pointing out that he was about to run faster? Everyone ran more than 10 laps together, didn't it make her look useless just now? Mina gritted her teeth and wanted to catch up with Takashi, but she didn't have excess physical strength, reaching the speed limit if she wanted to finish this test. Takashi didn't think much of his brilliant farewell. At that very moment, he had caught up with Thomas, who was running not far behind him. He came to his side, reached out and patted the shoulder of his roommate sleeping on the top bunk, then sped him up with a serious face, leaving a stream of dust in the distance. Thomas looked confused and quickly shouted, "Wait, wait for me. Damn, you're amazing, why do you remind me of that every time we meet?" thought Thomas with a wry smile. "I was just warming up. If you really have a spirit of effort in your wills, you'll catch up to me quickly." Takashi narrowed his eyes and kept running faster and faster. With high clouds of dust and sparks from his feet, Takashi gradually ran toward the front row of those leading the number of laps. Without Takashi realizing it, he generated a lot of hatred along the way. Perhaps it is in bad taste for other people. Takashi first ran beside a teammate for at least 10 seconds before overtaking him with a few small words of inspiration. Many increased their speed but could not catch up with Takashi. Takashi ran to his next target and said, "Hey kid, have you experienced true speed?" It was already the 20th lap at this point. Takashi was running to the left and looked at Eren Jiga at this time. The protagonist was dying from lack of air in his lungs. Eren blushed and sweated profusely as he tried to maintain speed. He gritted his teeth and strained to run forward. You could say he tried his best. Obviously, those in front were not afraid of being eliminated, so everyone was just working their best to push their limits along with others. Eren also saw his roommate Takashi, but he was no longer in the mood to greet him. However, Mikasa, who was following him, was only panting a little. Obviously, these two monsters were far from their limits. Takashi was quiet enough to look around. Behind Sasha was a teenage boy named Connie, to the left a handsome teenage boy with lightly tanned skin and a freckled face named Marco. In front, there were only 3 people, a teenager with a stocky composition, short blonde hair, light brown eyes, overly thin eyebrows and white skin. Next to him, there was a tall black-haired boy. In addition to the 2 of them, there is also a cool beauty with blonde hair and blue eyes, and the 3 people are not only relatively fast, but also have a smooth breathing rhythm. They don't seem tired. Takashi was a little curious and ran to the side of the stocky yellow-haired boy. "Hello, have you 2 done long-distance running?" Reina looked at Takashi in amazement. When did this person appear next to him? Reina, who had reacted, smiled and said, "Yes, I always wanted to be a soldier before, so we usually work out when we have nothing else to do." Berthold next to Reina didn't seem very talkative, he just nodded with a soft smile. A surprise, usually everyone before coming here doesn't do much exercise voluntarily, these days it's very hard to get food. Takashi just dropped a few words and looked away from Reina. Not too interested, Takashi didn't ask much more and just exchanged names with the 2. He was impressed by the physical condition of the 2. Keeping a steady speed, he ran alongside these people of few words. Although Takashi can run faster, it is not necessary after all. He was not participating in some competition that offered him a gift in first place, so it was not necessary in the end to come in first. In the last 2 laps, many people seemed to be on the verge of sudden death, sweating profusely, walking, jogging and very few running. Eren was about to roll his eyes. There was no way he was going to run as fast for as long as the others. More than a few people sat down on their knees and dropped out of the workout. In the end, Takashi came in third, but unfortunately he was right and there was no reward. Armin was not in good physical shape and was almost at the end of the group. After all, there are people who are better than him. Fortunately, the test was stopped when some of the recruits surrendered with a grim look on their faces. everyone is free to choose to withdraw from being a soldier in the training corps. In the camp, a group of boys and girls were sitting on the ground paralyzed, some were beating their legs without feeling them, others were lying on the ground out of breath, and everyone in general was exhausted. In the end, only one person was left in the camp, Sasha Blouse, nicknamed the Sweet Potato Girl. Takashi, when he had the opportunity, told him not to try so hard and that he would take care of bringing him something for dinner. In the end, Takashi looked at Sasha helplessly. It's not that he wasn't understanding enough with her friend, he can really get Sasha out of that trouble without having to run along with her for the rest of the night. Seeing that everyone had finished running, Instructor Keith came over and said a lot of words, roughly meaning, "You guys are the worst training soldiers I've ever had a chance to receive. This is really nothing. Anyone who has gone to school knows this. There are always some teachers who will say the same thing. It's good to get used to it, in the end they should just take it as inspiration to be better." After many years, Keith Shady's face was wrinkled and his hair was gone. He always had that disdainful expression, but never in their wildest dreams could they have imagined that the results of this period of training would yield such miraculous results. There were many giant characters in this place, wise and strong people. It could be said that there are no normal people among all the squads, so they would all show their fruits in the final evaluation. After the race, there is nothing to do today. After all, today is just a ceremony to join the training corps. Of course, those who almost foamed at the mouth would not think the same way as Takashi. Tomorrow's official training, the first level is to test the soldier's balance control in the special static balance method. This is to prepare for the use of the three-dimensional maneuvering equipment. If you don't meet the standard within 2 days, you can kiss goodbye from that test and from being a soldier. Then a group of people will be eliminated. At 6 o'clock in the evening, the sun was slowly setting, and the glow of the sunset dyed half of the sky red. It's almost dinner time, many people have gathered at the entrance of the dining hall, and Takashi has also arrived. After all, he promised to help Sasha get an extra piece of bread next to the one he already had sheltered. "Look, the Sweet Potato Girl is still running." A corporal taunted Sasha, who was running feebly in the courtyard. "Yeah, it's been 5 hours, she's an incredible physical force." "Hey, is that girl an acquaintance of yours?" "Ha ha, won't you help her?" A young soldier seemed to recognize Takashi, who was standing next to Sasha in the morning, and sneered. Takashi rolled his eyes. There were really boring people everywhere. He replied unceremoniously, "Donkeys and horses eat straw, what do you eat?" Takashi's cold eyes swept across the gaze of the young cadet who mocked her friend. The young cadet didn't know what to say and averted his gaze. Only donkeys don't know how to respond, but I'm sure if they were in this situation they would at least grunt angrily. Takashi walked to the side without paying any more attention to that stupid cadet. Mina, a pretty girl with black hair and 2 pigtails, said, "Look, someone already quit." On a hill not far away, a carriage drove off with some people who gave up, not the 5 people who were eliminated from the race. Those 5 people already left long before these, and they in the distance are the ones who voluntarily gave up. How? It's only the first day. Marco Bot could not believe that there were quitters after they had passed today's little test. It's just natural, if you're not strong enough you quit, they'd rather pull weeds and lift rocks. Eren Giga said with a calm look. Takashi didn't speak. He knew that little Eren Giga would soon get a slap in the face. Even if they are deserters, at least they had the will to try, that's considered a lot in the first place. At dinner in the evening, Takashi shamelessly took an extra piece of bread and sat alone to eat. Thomas and a group of people surrounded Eren Jeja to ask about the colossal titan. Connie asked Eren about the things that happened to Shiganshina's wall when it was knocked down. More curious than a baby, his questions and those of the others were all about the titans, and there were many interested eyes around waiting for those answers. Eren's face gradually turned ugly, not because of Connie's and everyone's inquiries, but because he remembered those bad memories, but Eren patiently told them what he saw and heard that day. When Connie asked what an ordinary titan looked like, Eren's spoon fell onto his plate in shock. Nothing but despair. Titans are said to be very disgusting, they smell bad and generate a strange sensation in your stomach. Takashi said to the cadet next to him. The cadet was surprised that Takashi was talking, doubtful if he was talking to himself or to him. Far away, smart and careful Markobot discovered Eren's abnormality and reminded them all not to ask more questions. This is not a nice thing after all, especially for those who have lost their loved ones. A grimace sounded and Jean Kirchstein sneered, "Hey, are you serious? You want to join the Exploration Corps?" Eren turned his head and saw Jean. Eren was also a bit impressed by Jean, but he didn't really like his views and said, "That's right, are you the coward who said he wanted to join the military police and go to the inner city to live a comfortable life?" "Yes, because I am sincere with my words, unlike some people, who will obviously be scared to death when they face the titans, all they do is pretend to be brave." Eren stood up abruptly and said with a bad expression, "Are you talking about me?" "Hey, I didn't mean anyone." Jean stood up, not to be left behind. The two quickly came together and looked at each other. Everyone watched silently. Are these two about to fight? Takashi also saw this scene and didn't want to stop it. Some people were born guilty. Eren is passionate and irritable, he makes reality rational, but both are people with sharp personalities, but their current ideals and aspirations are almost opposite. It is normal to fight when there are different opinions, it is not bad at all. Metallic sound. At this moment, the rest time bell rang, and Takashi walked out with Sasha's food without paying attention to what was going on in the distance. Chapter 8, Balance Test. As it was the first day they became soldiers, Eren and Jean held back a bit. Eren turned around and left, walking out of the dining room without saying anything. And Jean Kirstein on the other hand met his goddess, Mikasa, with her beautiful flowing hair. Jean's silly moves failed and with a red face she looked at Mikasa, who only had Eren in her heart, so she left only a perfunctory word before ignoring him completely. However, the brown-haired boy didn't give up and with a blushing face, he stealthily followed Mikasa's back. Imagining the possibilities made his heart beat faster. She was so beautiful, her flowing black hair, her delicate face, her thin, pink lips. All that together, without him realizing it, made him fall in love instantly. Takashi, who was off to the side preparing food for Sasha, also watched this classic scene that he remembers very well. That beautiful hair that Jean was captivated by would soon be cut down to his shoulders by Eren Jega's rabbits and his creative ideas with the use of three-dimensional maneuvering equipment. The tough love blow for Jean came too quickly, so she unconsciously pursued Mikasa without hesitation, only to watch that grim scene of Mikasa walking next to that idiot boy she had just bumped into in the dining hall. If he had known earlier, he would have spoken politely to Eren a moment ago instead of getting into a conflict with him. It was at that moment that Takashi looked at Eren, reminding Mikasa about her hair. Looking at Jean, he knew he noticed that too. Poor boy, considering a classic ending to the story of those two, Mikasa will possibly be the bride that Eren will marry at the end of his fight against the Titans. Takashi thought with a wry smile. Connie came out of the dining room humming an unfamiliar sweet tune as he walked past Jean. Jean, who stopped abruptly upon hearing the bad news about Mikasa's haircut first and, unconsciously wiped the tears from his hands with Connie's back. Connie was startled and looked back to see Jean wiping his hands on his clothes. Immediately, he was furious. "Hey, you! What the hell is wrong with you? What did you rub me? Did you just wipe your hands on my back?" Jean still looked lazy, didn't look at Connie at all and replied indifferently, "It's a matter of trust, don't worry, it's just water." "Hey!" Connie looked at Jean dumbfounded. He just now felt something extremely cold on his back. Who knows if what Jean rubbed on him was snot? Takashi long ago ignored this nonsense and walked towards Sasha, who was close by sitting in the distance. Taking a piece of bread, Takashi brought it closer towards Sasha to smell the food he brought with much difficulty. Shhhh. Sasha suddenly opened her eyes and rushed to snatch the bread from Takashi's hand in an instant. In the blink of an eye, 3 to 5 loaves of bread were devoured by Sasha cleanly. Even the speed at which she took the bread was too fast. Takashi felt that it was impossible to match that speed even if he trained for a long time. "Takashi, is there anything else?" Sasha looked at him expectantly. Takashi on his side was speechless. There were several pieces of bread and just to get Sasha some he had to put his embarrassment aside and ask the aunt who served the food for bread several times. Under the cold stare of that lady, Takashi was able to get extra food for Sasha. Just when Takashi was a little overwhelmed, a pretty girl with blonde hair, big blue eyes and a small body came over with a piece of bread and a bag of water. She said to Sasha, a little unsure, "Well, I brought you something to eat, this was the only thing I could get you. Are you a goddess?" "You are a goddess." Sasha hurried up, grabbed the bread and popped it in her mouth. The blonde girl gently handed her the bag of water and Sasha fell into her arms exhausted after eating. The corner of Takashi's mouth twisted angrily. It should also be noted that he is very handsome, with black hair and eyes as black as night, and a very clean face with almost no imperfections. He also delivered bread to Sasha. Why not call him a male god of beauty? He has a small impression of this blonde girl, her name seems to be Krista. Krista struggled to help Sasha, who was numb from extreme exhaustion, before Takashi came to help. However, a tall woman with black hair tied into a ponytail approached first and helped Krista. The girl with the tied hair looked at Krista and said, "Do you think it was worth all the effort? Did you do this as a favor to the potato girl?" Krista was stunned, not knowing what to answer. Forget it, somehow we have to help her get to the dorm. You want to do her a favor too? Krista asked unconsciously. No, this way she'll be in my debt. Her idiocy might come in handy in the future. Scoffed the black-haired woman named Yama. Takashi, who was standing to the side, rolled his eyes. Is that a compliment? Yo, aren't you the potato girl's partner? Boy, are you dissatisfied with me because of the words I said about your friend? Yama sneered with a venomous smile. I'm Takashi, I have no problem with your words. I should thank you for helping to take Sasha back to her room. It would be a problem if I did it in your place. Takashi said coldly. Ha 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 ha. Stop being funny and don't look at me with those eyes. Believe it or not, I could be your grandmother. Yama scoffed as she looked at Takashi. Ha ha, you think too much of yourself, I'd rather be alone for the moment. Takashi said unceremoniously. All right, stop arguing, send her back first. Krista stopped Takashi and Yama from fighting each other. Takashi shrugged and didn't say much. He had to trust the black-haired woman with the sharp mouth to send Sasha back to the girls' dorm. Otherwise, it would be a bit of a pain to trust the fragile blonde girl named Krista to take Sasha back. I appreciate your help and concern for my friend Sasha. She's usually complicated when food is involved, but she's a good girl, Takashi said as he looked at Krista. I know, I was impressed by the way she didn't hesitate in front of the instructor and acted under her own personality, Krista said with a sad smile. Is she lying? thought Iyad silently. After Takashi returned to the dormitory, everyone was ready for bed and didn't talk much. Tomorrow he will have to test the adaptability of the balance. It's better to go to bed earlier and get a good rest for tomorrow's tests. After a good night's sleep, Takashi slept very well and, the next day, a roar woke everyone in the dormitories. You have 10 minutes to wash up. After washing, assemble in the courtyard. At the whistle you will have to run 10 laps around the yard. After running, assemble at the mess hall entrance to then perform the balance adaptability test. Instructor Keith's strong voice was authoritative. The sink for the male dorm is at the rear of the dorm. Buckets are used, which is normal considering the time in which they lived. The tech tree of this world is amazing at certain points. The world within the walls is by no means at the level of World War I, but it does have strange and unreasonable technology, such as three-dimensional maneuvering equipment. But for bathroom misuse it still uses very basic stuff. With the deterrent of eliminating 5 people in yesterday's test, even though many people were sore in the morning, no one dared to miss. It seems that yesterday's initiation rite was very successful. The recruits are very polite. If there is a commotion, they will be sent back home to move rocks, so there is no room to cry. After the morning run, everyone who hastily finished breakfast approached the 5 instructors who would be conducting the balance test in front of the large courtyard. The operation of the three-dimensional maneuvering equipment is far from being as simple as it seems. After all, it is about letting people accustomed to two-dimensional space move into three-dimensional space to act naturally. Flying in the sky is not a simple matter. So before operating the three-dimensional maneuvering equipment, everyone should hang on a special balancing device for a period of time to test the adaptability. This test can roughly see a recruit's potential in using the three-dimensional maneuvering equipment. In the field, Takashi hung gently from the balancing simulator, barely shaking. This adaptation test is actually quite difficult. If you can't pass the test in 2 days, you should say goodbye to this place. It is known that dozens of recruits will be eliminated in each phase. Oh, amazing, Takashi, you impress me a lot. Thomas was a little surprised by Takashi's near-perfect performance. Sua. Takashi sighed softly. Sometimes in life you have to enjoy the special moments. He hung on the balancing device with ease, enjoying the exclamations of everyone around him. Among the remaining 309 recruits, more than 200 people have been evaluated and 187 people have passed the test. Those not qualified will have another chance tomorrow. So far, only Mikasa's performance can be comparable to Takashi's. Burst. Beside him, Eren fell headfirst to the ground hard. Well, Takashi felt pain when he looked at him anyway. No way. Eren hung half his body in the air, looking at the sky without understanding why he couldn't do this simple test. Eren. Mikasa looked at Eren beside her with a complicated look. She couldn't do anything for him right now. Eren Jiga, what the hell are you doing? Get your damn body up this instant. Instructor Keith shouted. Takashi sighed. If he didn't remember wrong, Aaron's belt was defective, otherwise he wouldn't fail this test. Seeing this, Takashi also released the safety buckle once on the ground and stepped out of the balancing device. It was time to let others take the test. Of course, he wasn't going to point out the problem with Aaron's belt. It would be hell to wear a defective belt. But this is not necessarily a bad thing. Setbacks make people grow. Aaron Giga after this will again use the same broken belt to hold on for 3 or 4 seconds during the evaluation the next day. Aaron Giga has to overcome obstacles to become stronger. After all, he is Takashi's future partner on the battlefield. He could not take away all the opportunities where he would become stronger. Chapter 9, Who is the Snitch? Haha, aren't you going to kill all the titans? Why can't you pass the first level of this simple test? As soon as he got close, Takashi heard a mocking voice in the crowd. Today's test was over, and now everyone around Aaron was mocking him for failing his test after everything he had said during the previous day. Stop talking nonsense, that wouldn't be said by colleagues. Aaron has worked hard and I'm sure he will succeed. A voice from the crowd said confidently. Marco Bot looked to Jean beside him to at least say a few words. After all, Jean's good friend Marco has a kind personality. What do you want me to say? This happens a lot to talkative people. He should have stayed quiet if the result of his skills was such an embarrassing display. After saying that, Jean looked at Marco's worried look and remarked, "Hey, you know I'm not wrong. This guy is always talking about killing all the titans. What's the result? You want me to yell at him that he'll get it?" Sneered Jean at Aaron while looking at Mikasa beside him. Takashi, who saw this, just sighed. Jealousy in adolescence can generate a hostile wall between people. He can't wait for Jean to behave in a better way, only then he could be calmer. "You did it, Takashi, with this we both passed the test." Sasha walked up to Takashi and patted his back amicably. "This was too simple. Your father would be very proud to see that his daughter has accomplished so much so far," Takashi said as he looked at Sasha, who had become more open to converse with him. "Thank you. Now let's go get something to eat." Sasha cordially invited Takashi to get food. "I told you, it was nothing but words." Takashi stopped abruptly, patted Sasha's shoulder and said, "Just wait a second, I have to lecture immature young men." Sasha looked at Takashi puzzled, watched as his friend walked into the crowd of people watching the test and followed closely behind. "Hey Takashi, we already completed the test, we should get out of this place." Sasha was a little confused. When Takashi walked into the crowd, there were capes still talking about Aaron, who was trying to straighten his body. Jean's voice came out again. She didn't seem to have left after completing today's test. "Hey! Let's stop watching, let's go." After saying that, Marco Bot was trying to leave this place with Jean. However, a long hand grabbed Jean's shirt and dragged him out of the crowd. Takashi's strength should not be underestimated. Jean, who almost fell down because of Takashi's pull, shouted with his face reddened with fury, "What the hell are you doing?" Burst. Jean Kirstein wanted to say some words to show his authority, but Takashi was not a person who talked much and threw Jean to the ground. Without throwing any punches, he used just the skill to make Jean fall down gently. Jean had a very good aptitude, but Takashi had some advantage because of the sneak attack, and also his strength might be one of the best of all the recruits in the crowd, plus his different ways of acting and all the results he has shown so far. Inexperienced, too naive, and if I hope to fight alongside this person later, it should show him who we will be in the future. Takashi looked at Jean with a cold expression. With only skill, Jean stumbled and fell backwards to the ground, swallowing all the harsh words he was about to say. Watching Takashi stand in front of Jean with a hard expression, he looked carelessly at the whole crowd. Takashi! Stop, don't do it, this time I don't care what he says about me, you can't hit people or you will be punished. Takashi, you'll run out of food if you fight with that guy. Sasha came to Takashi's side and advised on how painful it would be to not eat dinner. At Takashi's sudden action, Jean's good friend Marco Bot, who had been advising them to leave the place, feared what was happening now and was the first to react to stop Jean. As Marco stopped Jean, who was ready to fight, he looked at Takashi, fearing that he would still attack Jean, so he held out his hand for Takashi to stop. I admit that you are someone direct and quite possibly someone special in the future, but this kind of behavior I can't let go. Takashi looked at Marco Bot with a smile and then at Jean without moving from his place. I really have no intention of fighting, you can rest easy. Takashi looked at everyone and said, if this is the shitty behavior you have with a comrade of yours in this training camp, I would advise you not to become soldiers. Our problems will be erased on the battlefield, no matter which legion each of you goes to. You should respect Eren, who since entering the training corps has his clear vision to continue the fight against the Titans. Takashi held out his hand and scolded angrily. We will be soldiers, teasing between friends is fine and disputes will be accepted. But teasing by others' misfortune, we can't condone such behavior among ourselves. Takashi said without hesitation, I can assure that many of you will not finish the 3-year training, but you will have my respect for trying to the end. Jean Kirstein, who had long since calmed down, looked at Takashi with surprised eyes. To tell the truth, his comments were out of place a moment ago. Takashi felt he was helping everyone. Being a good soldier meant giving everything for the one next to him, and in this world that meant everything. This time Takashi was nice, but looking at Mikasa, who was ready to go in and fight, he can't assure that next time it will be something similar. HMPH. Jean Kirstein came out of the crowd with a snort. She had no words for this embarrassing situation. Takashi told the indignant young man to leave. After a while the crowd reacted to what had happened and showed embarrassed faces. Takashi patted her shoulder and said to Marco, I didn't have a choice this time, I'll talk to Jean later to work things out. Marco Bot left with a nod as he heard Takashi's words. After that, Takashi looked at everyone and said, the show is over, reflect on your actions today and be someone better for tomorrow. If you ever need advice, help, or just want to talk about your difficulties, you can come to me and you will receive everything I can do for you. What to do in this situation? Everyone was speechless as they listened to Takashi's lectures, as if suddenly looking at Instructor Keith. However, the crowd gradually dispersed. They had been harassing Eren for some time, which was not impressive at all. A certain blonde, cool blue-eyed beauty looked at Takashi again, of course not for him, but she thought the way he threw Jean had more technique than met the eye. Eren, who was practicing adaptability on the balance equipment, was relieved. Being surrounded by so many people and making a fool of himself is not a good experience. If it wasn't for being hung up on the equipment he would have done it himself. But seeing Takashi's actions, he couldn't have solved it better than his friend. Well, I hope you train now that there's no crowd around. Takashi smiled slightly and left with Sasha in search of food. In the distance, Instructor Keith and a silver-haired old man with glasses watched Takashi, who was retreating from the training field. He was quick and straightforward, solved everything in a different way and showed everyone that he is willing to be a good leader. Said the silver-haired man. He passed today's test with relative ease. His talent can create change in this generation of soldiers. Keith said with a glare at Takashi. Armin and Mayaksa stayed by Eren's side to continue practicing the balance technique and help their friend pass the test tomorrow. Shall we rest first? Mikasa grabbed Eren's hand and wanted him to stop and rest for a while. It's okay, I think I have what it takes to pass this test. Eren pushed Mikasa's hand away, wanting to keep practicing. He motioned for Armin to continue, showing the true nature of a man who is the protagonist of his world. Takashi felt nothing when he saw this scene from afar. He also respected Eren as a man and an indomitable person. Eren Jiga is a straight man of steel. Originally, his emotional intelligence was not high. Takashi before leaving had reminded him of some tips for him to learn a little more about the test personality. It was known that adaptive training is mainly about how to maintain balance and put the weight of the body on the waist and soles of the feet. In his opinion, there is nothing wrong with Eren's action skills, even if Mikasa has corrected him before. Basically, he just repeated some nonsense. As for the broken belt, it's not urgent, it's just a loading exercise that will make him stronger. Takashi thought as he was about to eat his dinner. Takashi Ackerman. The familiar roar sounded, and Instructor Keith walked into the dining room and looked at Takashi. Come this instant. Takashi unconsciously turned around and saluted. Sasha hid with Takashi. She feared that they would drag her to a possible punishment where she would not have dinner again today. Is something wrong, sir? Asked Takashi respectfully. Nothing's wrong, boy, run around the field 10 laps and finish before dinner. Instructor Keith coldly ordered. Yes, sir. May I ask why? Takashi expressed that he was a bit puzzled. Why punish him? Are you jealous of how handsome he is or because I had hair and he didn't? Obviously, Instructor Keith is not that boring, hey. You're someone really good, you fight on the first day of training, do you think I won't punish you for that? Takashi lost his temper but did nothing. The training corps was also an army, the commander gave an order and there was no room for negotiation. He was a bit depressed and looked around before starting. He didn't see Instructor Keith present when he made his epic entrance earlier, so it was unlikely that he didn't know what he did. Who is the mole? After Takashi left, Instructor Keith approached Jean again, who had a smile on his face, and said, 5 laps around the camp. What, why do you want me to join? Jean looked puzzled. Are you asking me? Instructor Keith looked at Jean and said, 10 laps. Damn it. Jean walked outside with a depressed look on her face. Things really went wrong today. How did she find out if the instructor wasn't supposed to have been there at the time? Who is the snitch? Instructor Keith reminded everyone, you will be punished in consequence for your violations. Let this be the last time something like this happens. Seeing that he was also punished, Takashi felt that his heart was calm now, his legs no longer hurt, his waist no longer ached, the day was calmer and the sun no longer burned his skin. The sun really didn't burn his skin, after all, the sun has been setting for a while now. Hey, you sued me behind my back. I respect you for being a cadet, but you actually went to make a little report like a little kid. Takashi looked at the sullen Jean beside him and started to spray his thoughts directly. What, who's going to report you? Didn't you secretly report me? Hearing Takashi's words, Jean froze. Don't even think about it, how could I make a report for such small things? Complaining is impossible in this life where dinner is important. Takashi Ackerman, I'm dying, I'm starving. I wasn't the one who reported this. Takashi thought with a dejected expression. Ha, it really wasn't you. Takashi looked at him sideways. Impossible. Jean denied with a look of disdain. He's someone very good at spying. Takashi thought for a moment, maybe Instructor Keith was eavesdropping from a distance, secretly watching, so he went straight to punish me and Jean was dragged in between. Bald Keith is spending a little time off after training. In fact, he thought too much. Instructor Keith had no time off. It was the same instructor who saw the dispute between him and Jean along with another instructor. Takashi noticed that Keith wasn't there at the time, but he didn't notice that the old man with glasses and the bald instructor were looking not far away. So what about that? Looking at Takashi, who suddenly stopped talking, Jean felt a little guilty. He wouldn't want to peel here, would he? Ha ha, nothing. Takashi looked at Jean and smiled to himself. I really appreciate you and I apologize. What? What the hell? It made him look stunned. It was unreasonable, and the guy who attacked him earlier actually apologized for his actions. Chapter 10, Different Thoughts. Just when Jean didn't know what to say upon hearing those words, Takashi suddenly changed his face and became serious as he said, Jean, can you look at those guys playing in the distance while watching us? They'll never know that we're not serving a punishment, but on the contrary, we're doing some extra training. What? Jean looked flabbergasted. You just have to remember that if you sweat a little more than the rest now, you'll bleed less in the future. If you concentrate on getting stronger and set your sights on a goal, you'll become someone much stronger than you think. If this were a scene from the main play, at least you're something like a supporting character. I'm not even someone from this world. Takashi thought to himself and pointed out, my goal in this life is to make a change. I'm just here for that. Let's work hard. I'm excited, but I don't know how many turns of conversation there were in such a short time. Jean thought to himself. Understanding more or less what was going on, he looked to the side and found a group of people watching him and Takashi. Some were pointing in his direction and more were laughing. These youngsters, they always like to watch the fun. After Takashi ran the 10 laps, it was time for dinner so long awaited by his stomach. Takashi and Jean walked together towards the dining room. Maybe it was because Takashi apologized, or also because they were both punished, but all in all Jean thought it was not annoying to get along with Takashi. Takashi on the other hand, thought Jean was a nice guy and had only acted that way because that was his personality and the jealousy of his crush led him to be a bit of a jerk. If you know what you're wrong about, you can change it by taking the first step. What's wrong with apologizing? Takashi knew that he would later fight alongside all of them and they were the only ones who would really know who he is in this world. He and Jean returned a little late, and after receiving their respective meals, they found they couldn't find a suitable place to sit. Fortunately, a bald head popped up among the tables and pointed to some spaces to sit together at Connie's table. Connie took a bite of bread and said with a smile, I heard that Instructor Keith punished you guys because you fought. How do you feel? It's boring. Jean snorted. Takashi didn't know what Jean's words meant, whether Connie is a boring guy or that the punishment run was boring. Without thinking much about it, Takashi looked at Connie and said, eat your food, it's not safe to talk with your mouth full. The boy named Connie is not really someone bald, his hair is actually shaved too short. Connie, hearing this, said with some sadness, Takashi, do you think I'm like your friend who only knows how to eat? Not to mention that Takashi was dining in an aggressive manner. At the other table, Erin was eating dinner with her eyes rolling, with a bandage on her head due to the accident she had after Takashi left. Right now she was doubting life. Armin looked at Eren with some concern. Today Eren had suffered numerous blows, practically his balance aptitude all afternoon, but every attempt ended in a failed result. There were many whispers in the surroundings. After all, Eren had always boasted that he would kill all Titans. However, thanks to Takashi's words in the field, everyone slowly stopped talking about it. Most people had reasoned and admitted that it wasn't right to make fun of something so significant for someone coming from a place where the Titans had stormed. Takashi only expressed what he thought, knowing how things would develop later on. Quite possibly some of the people here would die without killing a single Titan. As instructor Keith Shades puts it, top-notch Titan food. Eren's previous failures drew a lot of attention. Because Eren is someone who expresses his thoughts and goals openly, many people laughed to see him fail again and again. I'm going to get some fresh air, see you guys tomorrow. Takashi said goodbye to everyone and walked out of the dining hall. Sure. See you guys. Mikasa on her side was persuading Eren to quit soldiering, but Eren ignored her and took Armin away without a word. If Eren gave up his dream of killing Titans now, Takashi would seriously wonder if this was the original story or a different kind of world. Instead of returning to the dormitory, Eren and Armin began to ask for advice from those who performed well in the balance test. They started with Jean and Connie with Mark present. Well, that's about talent. If you make it you have talent, and if you don't, you're not someone capable of making it. Connie said with an air of arrogance. It was the first time in her life she felt that way. This time Jean, Markobot's good friend, enthusiastically shared his experience and some detailed advice. Jean's expression was very complicated, so complicated that ordinary people could not understand it. Originally, he wanted to ridicule Eren by saying something like, "And I would like to know tips for keeping face in embarrassing situations," but for some reason he remembered Takashi's words during the punishment run and much earlier when he spoke in general about companionship. Making fun of people doesn't make you stronger or benefit you in anything. But on the other hand, the goddess Mikasa in his heart made him jealous just seeing how he treats Eren and cares about his welfare more than hers. In the end, he didn't know what was going on and got carried away with mixed feelings, but still shared with Eren some tricks. Eren listened carefully and was focused, even though what Jean said was no different than what Mikasa or Takashi said, he still hoped to learn a bit more about it. Marco felt he knew Jean very well, but now he found out that he didn't know Jean well enough, let alone his behavior. In his opinion, it's somewhat normal to speak with a bit of hostility due to Jean's disagreements with Eren, but it was nothing like he expected. What happened to Jean today? Is it perhaps because of Takashi? Markobot thought silently. After a while, Eren took Armin away and kept looking for someone else for advice. What kind of tenacious willpower is this to let Eren, who seems stubborn, walk away with a complicated expression? This world is Attack on Titans, where everyone marches to their freedom, no matter if the body is wounded and bleeding. The cruel reality will soon be seen by everyone, and Takashi believes that by then he will be ready, even if he has to show his Susanoo in front of people, just for making a change to the situation of this world. At that time, there was only Takashi in the bedroom. Thomas was cleaning the dining room. Takashi was sitting cross-legged and practicing the chakra control method, which had become his habit both at night and in the morning. He doesn't quite know where his path is either. Will he make it to the end of this hell? If he somehow dies again, will God keep reaching out to him and giving him another chance? Sigh. Takashi finished training and went to sleep early, he needed to regain strength for tomorrow's trials. Eren and Armin came very late to the dorm. He together with Armin finally went to ask Reina and Berthold for advice as it happened in the original story. However, this Takashi did not know since he was completely asleep by that time. The next day, the weather was pleasant, sunny and cloudless. Because he went to bed early yesterday, today Takashi got up much earlier than others and went for a walk while looking at the layout of the different buildings of the training corps. The open space of the base near the cliff is the general square of the training corps. Rows of strange tools were laid out on one side of the training plaza. In front of the general training square is the basic building of the training corps. From left to right, in order is the mess hall of the corporals in training, classrooms next to it, the food store of the training corps and the equipment store. There is also a special infirmary for the wounded. At the other end of the training square is where the instructors of the training soldiers live, and some other buildings that Takashi doesn't quite know how they work are ignored. It seems to be something different from the animation. After all, this is a real world. It took Takashi a long time to recognize the main characters in the plot. There is still a difference between two-dimensional paper and three-dimensional people with flesh and blood. Takashi must admit that he admires all those who recognize people at a glance. Only a god can recognize all the characters from an anime to the real world. Takashi was bored, standing in the hallway outside the dining room, waiting for breakfast. He was sad, not to mention he had to opt for a strong demeanor in front of others. He wished strongly that he could touch a three-dimensional stunt team. I got up early and you're the only one here wasting time. A female voice sounded with a slightly ironic tone. Yuma stood behind Takashi in an unfamiliar moment and next to her was the blonde-haired girl from the other day, Krista. Takashi looked at Yuma and Krista. He shrugged. Since you brought it up, do you want me to do something to you? Now that I see it, I always look at you next to Krista. I heard from some people that there are certain types of women who hit for the same direction. Shouldn't I try to make you fall in love? Giving Takashi a look of contempt, Yuma ignored his words and spoke with a tone full of mockery. It was a surprise that you didn't get your face smashed to death yesterday. You sincerely deserved it. Is it me or are you okay with me treating you in a closer way? Takashi said with a smile. Even your friend, the potato girl, wouldn't notice someone like you. What a joke. Yuma said. Takashi mimicked Yuma's tone. You witch, are you dissatisfied with me? Yuma took a deep breath and before he could get angry, Krista reacted in time, looking that both of them were about to fight and pushed Yuma away. Didn't you see what happened yesterday? I thought you would act smarter. What's wrong with you? Krista didn't understand the attitude Yuma had with Takashi. Just let me smash his face, I'll do everyone a big favor. Yuma said with a snort. Anytime, if you're looking for comfort you can seek me out. Takashi flashed a friendly smile. The recruits of the training corps now have a small number. Currently, 286 people have passed the balance adaptability test and 23 people, including Eren, have failed. If they cannot meet the standard today, they can only return home. At 9 o'clock in the morning, the sky was very intense and the clouds were clear. Now the second round of testing for unqualified recruits began. Some people were happy and some people were sad. 23 people tested one after another, some narrowly passed and some left sad. Finally, I don't know if it was fate, but Eren was the last one to test, which caught the attention of the general audience. Many people wondered if this guy who threatened to kill all the Titans could perform a miracle like the others who narrowly passed today. Eren was about to step forward, but found that Takashi was holding him back. Takashi found that Eren's hands were shaking, showing how nervous Eren was at the moment. Eren looked at Takashi doubtfully, not understanding why he was blocking him. Takashi handed him the belt that had already been removed from his body. "If you don't want to leave me alone on the battlefield, wear my belt. This is the only way we can fight together in the future, Eren Yaja." Did he notice? Instructor Keith thought as he looked at Takashi's friendly smile. That's it guys, hope you like the video. Like, share and subscribe the channel. Make sure you comment below what kind of stories you want to see next and any recommendation you have.